Hello, everyone. I am Andy, coming to you from the United Kingdom again.
Hello, Andy. I'm Scott, another one of your hosts, and I am overlooking the Chicago River at the moment. Andy, did you know that they dye the river green on St. Patrick's Day here?
I did not know that.
Do you do?
Is
Is that a thing where in the UK, St. Patrick's Day?
St.
Do you know
Patrick's
what I'm
Day is
talking about?
an Irish thing.
Yeah,
St. Patrick being the patron saint of Ireland, which is not something that we celebrate so much in the UK.
you don't observe it at all. It's not a thing.
Not really, no.
It's like a holiday
As
here.
we've
It's
kind of
like
been off and
everybody just
on.
it's
We, in the UK, we've kind of been off and on at war with them for many years over
Mm.
the Northern Ireland location, which is probably a topic we should avoid discussing on a podcast.
You got very nervous when I brought this up. Well, anyway, listen, St. Patrick's Day
Yeah.
is a big thing in North America, especially in Chicago.
Mhm.
And the reason I just mentioned is because I was just looking out the window at the Chicago River, and it is not St. Patrick's Day, and that river is green.
Oh, that is interesting.
Now,
That's
listen,
a
it's a different shade
couple
of
of
green
months
on
too
St.
late, but
Patrick's
maybe
Day.
maybe it had some leftover dye or something.
It is bright green on St. Patrick's Day today. I think it's just regular green.
Oh, I see. I
Anyway,
see.
I digress.
No, that's fine. And back to the organization. Here we are speaking to you from the Tea and Timbits podcast, and this is a podcast about global perspectives on business development to help you prosper. And today we're going to pick up on a topic that I introduced in the story last week, which is going to be about the resistance to change. However, before we get into that, Scott, do you have any stories other than Green Rivers from the Windy City?
Quick anecdote, which I think everybody can relate to, but it happened to me recently, and so I thought I'd share it. Is recognizing the fact that your competitors are also often your allies. So I'm at an event here, and there are other agencies that do what we do in the digital space. This is an e-commerce conference, and I've been getting to know some of the other agencies that are here. And a lot of them will. The default posture is standoffish, and oh well, I can't talk to you. You're the enemy. But then I've met a couple who are like, oh, you know what? We should connect. Let's grab coffee. Let's talk about business. Let's share stories about what's working, what's not working,
No, that's a great
and let's
attitude.
see what we can learn from each other. And I mean, that's just, I mean, that then right there, like that just, when you find that person, it makes it all the much more worthwhile. So have had a couple of very good conversations
Hmm.
along those lines, and it's a good reflection to just be open-minded about sort of what you can gain from everybody in the room.
Yeah, no, that's right. I don't think anyone should be afraid of competition. I think competition is a healthy thing because it means that your market is alive, and
Sure, yeah.
there's opportunities there, and collaboration and partnership, whether a competitor or not, I think is something very valuable that we should all embrace and encourage, no matter
Yep.
how hard it is sometimes to do that.
So there you go.
But then we are. Okay. Thank you for the story. Very interesting. And let's get into today's topic. It's about the resistance to change, not the resistance to partnering with your competitors. But that may be something very related. But this came out of the back of the story I mentioned last week, where I had experienced three different companies who had been implementing different change processes, but that the organization were being resistant to it. So the sales teams were sort of resisting the change process, the implementation of it, the actions that are required of them, and so on. And so I thought this week we could talk about how to mitigate that if
Mhm.
you have a change process in your organization, and what you can do about it to make sure it's a success.
So I don't want to jump straight to sort of solving this, but I asked you a question which I'm going to restate here or re-ask
Mhm.
because I think it can help us get into it, which is when you encounter this resistance, do you think it is because there is an inherent human aversion to change, or do you think that it is just because the value, the benefit has not been clearly communicated? And you can
I,
take
uh,
so
I
so which I mean I guess the second question is a
Mm.
leading question, because obviously that kind of gets at how to solve for the first inherent problem. But I'm still curious. What do you think is the primary driver there in your experience of that resistance? Is it just I don't care what the solution is or why we're doing this? Why can't the way we've been doing it just keep happening? Versus building the case for support and getting people aligned with the direction we want to go.
It's the answer to the question is that it is a multifaceted challenge that
Mm-hmm.
that leaders face, regardless of what the change process is or what industry they're in, what size of business, what size of team. Because, as you alluded to, there is a natural human resistance to change. It's a fear that
Yeah.
people have. People become comfortable, and to uproot them, to make them feel uncomfortable, is not a good thing. People will resist it if they feel that they have the power to resist. And I think, coming back to the other point as well about the communication is very important. But even when the value of the change has been communicated, the importance of the change has been communicated, and it's been done in the right way, it's been done consistently, and it's been done in a clear and concise way, you will still have the resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's how you manage that resistance and work through that when it's there is, I think, the key. It's
So
in some
when do
way,
you
there's
know?
elements of it that come back. Well, I was just going to say that there's some elements of it that come back to the tough love episode that we did a few weeks ago,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think at some point, as a leader, if you're trying to implement a
Uh-huh.
change, you have to say, look, this decision has been made. We are going to make this change. This is going to happen, and I expect you to come along with me. And I expect you to take the actions that we are going to discuss. I expect you to follow the process as it's been outlined, and I expect you to adopt these in part of your day-to-day activities. And that's a tough thing to do as a leader, but I think it's still very important that you allow a platform for people to express their concerns, their fears, their anxieties, their resistance, and that you then appoint people within the organization. You focus on the ringleaders, and you give them some sort of power to and responsibility to help actually implement that change. There's many different ways of doing it, but I think at some point you have to be a bit tough, and you have to be a bit clear that this is going to happen. If you don't want to be along on the journey, then maybe there's a journey for you somewhere else.
I disagree.
Oh, good.
Um, okay, so let me qualify that. I think that sort of that top-down, heavy-handed approach is absolutely about the worst way to manage change. And that is your last resort. That is what you do when you've tried everything else and you have to take a few outlying people and say, listen, if you can't get on board with this, then we're going to have to find another seat for you to sit in.
I believe
I
that is
think
what the episode is about, though.
about what do you mean?
About the resistance to change and managing the resistance to change. So
Yes,
that
but
is the bit. So I
you
think
don't
we
just throw
actually
your
do
arms up,
agree.
right?
I
So
think we do agree, because that is not the first way of doing it. Going
okay,
going
okay,
out to the organization, we are making this change. This is the
right,
way it's going to be. You must all do it, or you're out. That
right,
is a
right.
very bad approach. I agree completely. Yes, you
Okay,
don't do
okay.
that. But this is the point where you're addressing that resistance to change, where you get to that point where you're going,
I
okay,
see, I see. So we've
it's
already
not
gotten
happening.
through all that, and now
Yes,
you've still got resistance.
correct,
Okay. So,
correct.
okay. So resistance to change tends to come up in my experience right from the get-go, right? So, I think that you need to make sure that you're clear about, why you're
Mm,
changing, what the change means, but it's still for listen, most of the time it gets done in exactly that way. You communicate clearly. This is why we're doing it. This is where we're going. This is what we believe, and we really need everybody to pause, reflect, and sort of bring themselves into alignment with this. And we'll have some discussions and make sure that your concerns and questions are addressed, and so that we get your feedback, and so that this can be as smooth a process as possible. However, I think one critical misstep that happens before you even implement the change is is integrating as many people that are involved in that change in the planning for the change.
Yeah.
So getting them to contribute to what they think the change should be, explaining to them before you re-engineer anything, this is the problem that we're having. We want everybody's input. And listen, it does not mean that you need to accommodate everybody's input, but you absolutely get benefit by saying, listen, let's review where we're at. Let's discuss the is the problem even
Hmm.
something that everybody recognizes to be true, or does somebody have a different perspective on whether or not this is a problem, why it's a problem, how we got into this place? So I think if you skip that step, then you much sooner in the change implementation get to that point where you kind of have to take a more heavy-handed
Yeah,
approach.
no, I think you're completely right. And that, managing the change up front and preparing for change is definitely, beneficial to make a collaborative process.
Right.
As we talk now, I think there's definitely going to be an opportunity for us to maybe do a little bit of a series on this, because there's many aspects that we want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah, yeah,
about this that
yeah.
we're trying to squeeze into one episode. So it led from a story into an episode, and I think the episode's going to lead into a little bit of a mini series. But
I mean, it is
let's
such
discuss
a
that.
classic business
Yeah,
challenge,
it is
regardless of where you
absolutely.
sit in
Yeah.
the organization, and many a book and opinion have been levied against it. So
Mm.
I
But I
look
think
forward to
there's
continuing the
one thing
conversation.
that you touched on there as well, and that is that very often in an organization, your change that you're trying to implement or you're trying to introduce may be related to something that you've already been sort of saying, I think it's a good idea if we do this, or maybe you should
Yeah,
go
yeah,
and do some more prospecting, maybe you should have some more time on the telephone and not just send emails and LinkedIn messages to people. You should actually pick
right.
up the telephone. But it's never been a behavior that's been, I suppose, punished for not doing, or it's been,
Yeah,
held accountable for how much people have done it. And so, of course, when you start to introduce a change process and you say, and now we're going to only do telephone prospecting, people go, yeah, but you said that, for the last 3
yeah,
years as well, and
right,
we
right.
it didn't make any difference that we didn't do it. So why should I bother now? And I think so. There needs to be a bit of hands up ownership from that leader as well, and
Hmm.
say, look, the past 3 years, I've been allowing you to do your email messaging and your LinkedIn messaging as your primary lead generation, and it's just not working. I've
Right,
encouraged you
right.
to use the telephone. You haven't been doing it. And I think that's the thing that's missing. So I really think that we need to be focusing on this now. My fault for not encouraging it, not pushing it further, and not being more encouraging and supportive of you in doing that. I
Hmm.
think a leader, however they communicate it, but they need to put their hands up and say, sorry, I was wrong, but
Well,
this is what we're doing now, and this is why we're doing it.
I've encountered situations where, and I think even we had a little bit of a moment about this just a moment ago, which was um, there's actually a shared vision about where the change is needed and what the right change should be. But the way that it gets articulated between
Hmm.
different people leads to confusion
Yeah.
and uncertainty and friction. And I think you need to sort of set the frustration aside, and you kind of need to agonize over that for as long as you possibly can to get everybody really singing from the same song sheet. Listen,
Hmm.
you're saying the same thing, but I think you mean, and I think this, and like I've had this so many times where you finally get to the end of that, 90-minute session that was only booked
Hmm.
for an hour, to realize, right, okay, like I get what you're saying now. I get what you're saying now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is all crystallizing for me. A lot of people just need the time to feel like, the vision that they have in their mind is actually reflected in the
Hmm.
change that's coming, because they might not recognize it the way they imagine it. And once you give everybody time to sort of immerse themselves in it, that picture becomes clearer in everybody's mind.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and I think this is the best thing about this discussion that we're having now. We're staying very high level, but we're talking about the combating the resistance to change isn't just focused on that bit when you've got that resistance to change. It's about mitigating that up front. It's about putting all of the
Right.
steps in place at the as early as possible in order to address and take out a lot of these potential resistance as you get towards the end, so that when you finally implement it, it's much easier to have a more professional, relaxed, and calm conversation with people to get them back on board, and you minimize that element of risk if you do the proper work and preparation up front.
There you go.
Super. Well, thanks very much, Scott. I really appreciate the discussion. I think we should definitely have a think about maybe doing a series on this, but let's see what the listeners
sure.
give us as feedback. Maybe they don't want us to talk about this at all. Anyway, it's been a nice conversation. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to get in touch with us and tell us whether you want us to do a series on change, then please do get in touch. Go to tandtimbits.com and you will find many ways to get in touch and many ways to listen to this episode again on different platforms, should you so desire. Speak to you again soon, Scott.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everybody.